The wine glass hit the marble countertop with a sharp clink that seemed to echo through our entire marriage. Vanessa's perfectly manicured fingers drummed against the kitchen island as she delivered the words that would change everything. "You're not my priority anymore, Alex. I need excitement in my life." Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. I looked up from my laptop where I'd been reviewing code for a client's security system. The irony wasn't lost on me. I spent my days protecting other people's digital lives while mine was apparently falling apart. My wife of 7 years stood there in her designer workout clothes, looking like she'd just stepped out of a magazine. Her blonde hair was pulled back in that effortless way that probably took 30 minutes to achieve. "Fair enough," I said, closing the laptop with deliberate calm. "Neither am I." The response clearly wasn't what she'd expected. Vanessa's blue eyes narrowed, searching my face for some reaction: hurt, anger, desperation. Instead, she found something that probably unsettled her more: indifference. "That's it? That's all you have to say?" I shrugged, already mentally calculating how this conversation would play out. As an IT consultant who specialized in corporate security, I'd learned to read patterns, to anticipate problems before they became disasters. The signs had been there for months: the late nights at her PR firm, the constant phone buzzing during dinner, the way she'd started treating our home like a hotel. "What would you like me to say, Vanessa? That I'll fight for us? That I'll change?" I stood up, stretching my back. At 38, I was starting to feel every hour spent hunched over computers. "We both know that's not what you want to hear." Her phone buzzed on the counter. Without thinking, she grabbed it, her thumb swiping across the screen with practiced ease. The small smile that played across her lips told me everything I needed to know. "Who's texting?" I asked, though I already suspected the answer. "Just Janelle. Girls' night tomorrow." The lie came so smoothly I almost admired her technique. Almost. Janelle Morrison had been Vanessa's best friend since college, a real estate agent with a talent for drama and an addiction to other people's business. If Vanessa was planning something, Janelle would be right there encouraging it. "Have fun," I said, heading toward my study. "I'll probably work late anyway. The Henderson project needs to be finished by Friday." "Alex?" Her voice stopped me at the doorway. When I turned back, she was studying me with that calculating look she got when she was trying to figure out an angle for one of her PR campaigns. "Are you okay with this? With us taking some space?" The question was loaded with subtext. What she was really asking was whether I'd make things difficult, whether I'd cause a scene, whether I'd interfere with whatever she had planned. "Space sounds perfect," I said. "I've got plenty to keep me busy." That night, I moved my pillow and a blanket into the study. The leather couch wasn't particularly comfortable, but it beat lying next to someone who'd already checked out of our marriage. Through the thin walls of our suburban Maine home, I could hear Vanessa on the phone, her voice a low murmur punctuated by occasional laughter. I opened my laptop and started working, but my mind kept drifting. 7 years of marriage, and it had come to this: polite indifference and separate bedrooms. Part of me wondered if I should feel more upset about it. Instead, I felt something closer to relief. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of Vanessa's heels clicking across the hardwood floor. She was dressed for work in a navy blazer and skirt that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. Her makeup was flawless, her hair styled in loose waves that framed her face perfectly. "I'll be late tonight," she said without looking at me. "Client dinner." "Another one?" I asked, pouring coffee into my favorite mug, a chipped ceramic thing that said, "World's Okayest Husband." Vanessa had given it to me as a joke for our anniversary 2 years ago. The irony felt particularly sharp this morning. "It's a big account. Morrison and Associates is handling their grand opening." She grabbed her purse and keys, still avoiding eye contact. "Don't wait up." After she left, I sat in the kitchen drinking coffee and thinking about patterns. In cybersecurity, you learn to spot anomalies, changes in behavior that indicated a potential breach. Vanessa's recent patterns were textbook: increased secrecy, unexplained absences, emotional distance, and the classic deflection technique of making the other person feel like they were the problem. My phone rang, interrupting my analysis. The caller ID showed my brother Jerry's name. "Morning, sunshine." Jerry's gravelly voice filled the kitchen. At 42, my older brother was a retired cop who now ran a small private investigation business. "You sound like someone ran over your dog." "Don't have a dog," I said. "Vanessa's allergic." "Right. How is the Ice Queen?" Jerry had never particularly liked my wife, though he'd been diplomatic about it over the years. He claimed she reminded him of the kind of people who called the cops on kids for playing too loud in the park. "She's taking some space," I said. "Ah." There was a long pause. "Want to talk about it?" "Not particularly." "Fair enough. But if you change your mind, you know where to find me. And Alex, if you need anything looked into, I'm here." After hanging up, I decided to take a walk through downtown. Our little Maine suburb was the kind of place where everyone knew everyone else's business, which made it both charming and suffocating, depending on your perspective. I ended up at Rita's Coffee Corner, a small shop that served as the unofficial headquarters for local gossip. Rita Kowalski was a 60-something Polish immigrant who'd been running the coffee shop for 15 years. She had silver hair, kind eyes, and an uncanny ability to know everything that happened within a 10-mile radius. "Alex?" she called out as I walked in. "The usual?" I nodded, settling onto one of the mismatched stools at the counter. Rita made the best coffee in town, and her homemade blueberry muffins were legendary. "You look tired," she said, sliding a steaming mug across the counter. "Everything okay at home?" Before I could answer, the bell above the door chimed. Marge and Tom Patterson walked in, both dressed in matching jogging outfits. They'd been friends with Vanessa and me for about 3 years, ever since we'd met them at a neighborhood barbecue. "Alex!" Marge's voice was a little too bright, the way people sounded when they were uncomfortable. "How are you doing?" "Can't complain," I said. "How's the marathon training going?" Tom shifted his weight from foot to foot, not quite meeting my eyes. "Good, good. Listen, we should all get together soon. It's been too long." There was something in their tone that set off my internal alarm system. These were people who usually suggested specific dates and times, who pulled out their phones to coordinate schedules. This vague, "we should get together soon," was the kind of thing people said when they were trying to be polite but had no intention of following through. "Sure," I said. "Give us a call." They ordered their drinks and left quickly, their conversation dying as they walked past the window. Rita watched them go, then turned back to me with raised eyebrows. "Interesting," she said. "What's interesting?" "Oh, nothing. Just that they were in here yesterday asking about you and Vanessa. Seemed very concerned about your marriage." I felt something cold settle in my stomach. "What kind of questions?" "The kind that people ask when they already know the answers." Rita leaned across the counter, lowering her voice. "Alex, I like you. You're one of the good ones. So I'm going to tell you something, and you can do with it what you want." I waited. "Your wife has been seen around town with someone who isn't you, someone who works at that fancy gym downtown. Tall, dark hair, drives a silver Mercedes." The description fit Trent Parker, a personal trainer who'd built a reputation for being very personal with his female clients. I'd heard rumors about him before, whispers about broken marriages and angry husbands. "How sure are you?" I asked. "Sure enough that I thought you should know." I finished my coffee and walked home, my mind processing this new information. When I got to the house, I noticed that Vanessa's car was already gone, even though she usually didn't leave for work until 9. It was barely 8:30. That evening, I did something I'd never done before. I went through Vanessa's things, not her phone, that never left her side, but her dresser, her closet, her bathroom counter. I wasn't sure what I was looking for until I found it. Hidden behind a stack of towels in the linen closet was a small gift box from an expensive jewelry store. Inside was a receipt for a men's watch, purchased 3 days ago for $800. The watch I'd gotten for my last birthday had cost $40 and came from Target. I sat on the edge of our bed, her bed, really, since I'd been sleeping in the study, and stared at the receipt. The evidence was circumstantial, but the pattern was clear. Vanessa was having an affair with Trent Parker, and she was buying him expensive gifts while treating me like a roommate she barely tolerated. The smart thing would have been to confront her immediately, to demand an explanation, to fight for our marriage. But as I sat there in the gathering darkness, I realized I didn't want to fight for it. What I wanted was something else entirely. I wanted to see how far she'd go. I wanted to watch her dig her own grave, to document every lie, every betrayal, every moment of careless cruelty. And then, when she least expected it, I wanted to show her exactly what happened when you underestimated the quiet guy in the background. Vanessa had said I wasn't her priority anymore. That was fine. She was about to become mine. The next morning, I watched Vanessa get ready for work with new eyes. Every movement seemed calculated, the way she chose her outfit, the extra attention she paid to her makeup, the perfume she sprayed on her wrists and neck. She was dressing for someone, but it wasn't me. "I might be late again tonight," she said, checking her reflection in the hallway mirror. "This Morrison account is really demanding." "Of course it is," I said, not looking up from my laptop. She paused, as if waiting for me to ask questions or voice objections. When I didn't, she grabbed her keys and left. I gave her a 10-minute head start, then got in my car and followed her. It wasn't difficult. Vanessa drove like someone who'd never gotten a speeding ticket, always 5 miles under the limit, always using her turn signals. I stayed 3 cars back, feeling like a character in one of those detective shows she used to watch. Instead of heading to her office downtown, she turned toward the Riverside shopping plaza. I parked across the street and watched as she went into Starbucks. 5 minutes later, Trent Parker walked in to join her. Even from a distance, I could see why Vanessa might be attracted to him. He was tall and lean, with the kind of effortless confidence that came from knowing people found you attractive. He wore expensive workout clothes that showed off his physique, and his smile was the kind that probably worked on a lot of women. They sat at a corner table, leaning toward each other like conspirators. Vanessa laughed at something he said, touching his arm in that casual way that suggested intimacy. I took photos with my phone, not because I planned to use them in a divorce proceeding, but because I wanted to document the timeline of her betrayal. After 20 minutes, they left separately. Vanessa headed to her office while Trent got into his silver Mercedes, the same car Rita had described. I followed him to Elite Fitness, the upscale gym where he worked. That afternoon, I did something I hadn't done in years. I signed up for a gym membership. The young woman at the front desk was enthusiastic about their personal training programs. "Trent Parker is one of our most popular trainers," she said, showing me his photo on the wall. "He specializes in couples fitness and lifestyle coaching." The irony was thick enough to cut with a knife. "I'll think about it," I said. Over the next few days, I fell into a routine. I'd work my regular IT consulting jobs during the day, then spend my evenings gathering information. I learned that Trent had a reputation for getting involved with married clients. I discovered that he'd been divorced twice, both times for adultery. I found out that he drove a leased Mercedes he could barely afford and lived in an expensive apartment complex that was bleeding him dry. More importantly, I learned about Vanessa's patterns. She met Trent 3 times a week, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday mornings at various coffee shops around town. She'd started working out at Elite Fitness on Tuesday and Thursday evenings, always booking sessions with him. And on weekends, she'd started taking mysterious day trips, claiming she needed space to think. The digital trail was even more revealing. Using techniques I'd learned in cybersecurity, I managed to clone her phone during one of the rare moments she left it unattended. The messages I found were a masterclass in deception and betrayal. Vanessa to Janelle. Alex is so clueless. I could probably bring tea home for dinner and he wouldn't notice. Janelle to Vanessa. LOL. Poor guy. But you deserve to be happy. Vanessa to Trent. Can't wait for tonight. Alex is working late again. Trent to Vanessa. Your husband sounds boring as hell. You need a real man. The messages went back 3 months. 3 months of lies, of elaborate cover stories, of casual cruelty directed at the man she'd promised to love and honor. But what struck me most wasn't the betrayal. It was the arrogance. They genuinely believed I was too stupid or too passive to figure it out. That weekend, while Vanessa was on one of her mysterious day trips, I decided to pay Trent a visit. I'd learned that he usually spent Saturday afternoons at his apartment complex's pool, holding court with whatever women happened to be around. I found him exactly where I expected, lounging in a chair that probably cost more than my monthly car payment. He was surrounded by 3 women in bikinis, all hanging on his every word as he told some story about his college football days. I walked up to the group and cleared my throat. "Excuse me, are you Trent Parker?" He looked up, his expression shifting from annoyance to curiosity. "Yeah, that's me. Do I know you?" "Alex Marchand," I said, extending my hand. "I think you know my wife, Vanessa." The color drained from his face, but he recovered quickly, standing up to shake my hand. His grip was firm, the kind of handshake meant to establish dominance. "Oh, right. Vanessa's mentioned you. She's been making great progress with her fitness goals." "I'm sure she has," I said, my voice perfectly neutral. "She speaks very highly of your personal attention." We stared at each other for a moment, both of us understanding the subtext. The women around the pool had gone quiet, sensing tension. "Well," Trent said finally, "I should probably get going. Early day tomorrow." "Of course," I said. "I'm sure you have a lot of people depending on you." As he gathered his things and left, I could see his hands shaking slightly. Good. Let him wonder what I knew, what I was planning. Let him spend the next few days looking over his shoulder. That evening, Vanessa came home from her day trip, glowing with satisfaction. She was carrying shopping bags from expensive stores, and she'd gotten her hair done. "How was your day?" she asked, the question perfunctory. "Productive," I said. "I met one of your friends." She froze in the middle of unpacking her purchases. "Oh? Which friend?" "Trent Parker. Nice guy. Very attentive." For just a moment, panic flashed across her face. Then the mask slipped back into place. "Oh, you mean my trainer? Yes, he's very professional." "I'm sure he is." We stood there in the kitchen, the air thick with unspoken accusations and denials. Finally, Vanessa broke the silence. "I'm tired. I think I'll go to bed early." "Sweet dreams," I said. After she left, I sat in my study planning my next move. I'd gathered enough evidence to confirm what I already knew. Now it was time to start applying pressure. But I wouldn't confront them directly. That would be too easy, too clean. Instead, I'd let them destroy themselves, one carefully orchestrated disaster at a time. I opened my laptop and began researching Trent's financial situation. It didn't take long to discover that he was living well beyond his means. His credit cards were maxed out, his car payment was 3 months behind, and he'd been borrowing money from several different sources. A man in that situation would be particularly vulnerable to the right kind of pressure. I spent the next hour crafting an anonymous email to the management company that owned his apartment complex. The message was simple. I was concerned about one of their tenants who seemed to be running some kind of unlicensed business out of his unit, with married women coming and going at all hours. I suggested they might want to look into it. Then I sent a similar message to the leasing company for his Mercedes, expressing concern about someone who might be using their vehicle for activities that could void the insurance coverage. Finally, I created a fake social media account and started following the wives and girlfriends of Trent's other clients. It wouldn't take much to plant seeds of doubt to suggest that their husband's trainer might be offering more than fitness advice. By the time I went to bed, I'd set a dozen small fires that would soon grow into a conflagration. Trent Parker thought he was playing games with a boring suburban husband. He was about to learn that some games had consequences he'd never considered. As I drifted off to sleep on the study couch, I found myself smiling for the first time in months. Tomorrow would bring new opportunities to tighten the net around my wife and her lover. They wanted excitement in their lives. I was about to give them more than they could handle. Monday morning brought the first results of my weekend's work. I was having coffee at Rita's when my phone buzzed with a text from Vanessa. "Can't meet this morning. T having car trouble." Rita noticed my smile. "Good news?" "You could say that." Through the coffee shop window, I could see Trent walking down Main Street, his usual swagger replaced by obvious frustration. His Mercedes was nowhere in sight. I'd heard through the local grapevine that it had been repossessed over the weekend. Apparently, the leasing company had received an anonymous tip about potential insurance violations and decided to cut their losses. "That's the gym trainer everyone's been talking about," Rita said, following my gaze. "Looks like he's having a rough morning." "Karma's funny that way," I said. That evening, Vanessa came home later than usual, her mood noticeably sour. She threw her purse on the kitchen counter with more force than necessary. "Bad day?" I asked, not looking up from my laptop. "The worst. One of our biggest clients is threatening to pull their account because of some ridiculous rumors." I knew which client she meant. Morrison and Associates, the real estate firm that was supposedly keeping her so busy. I'd spent some time researching their business practices and had discovered some interesting information about their tax filings. A few anonymous tips to the right regulatory agencies had apparently started an audit that was making everyone nervous. "That's terrible," I said, my voice full of false sympathy. "What kind of rumors?" "Nothing important. Just small-town gossip getting blown out of proportion." She was lying, of course. The rumors weren't about Morrison and Associates. They were about her. I'd been carefully seeding social media with subtle comments about a certain PR manager who seemed to be spending a lot of time with her client's personal trainer. Nothing actionable, nothing that could be traced back to me, but enough to get tongues wagging in a town where everyone knew everyone else's business. "I'm sure it will blow over," I said. "I hope so. The last thing I need right now is drama." The irony was delicious. Vanessa had built her career on managing other people's public image, but she'd been sloppy with her own. She'd underestimated how quickly gossip could spread in a small town, especially when it involved attractive people behaving badly. Over the next few days, I watched the pressure build. Trent was forced to take the bus to work, a humiliation that clearly ate at him. Several of his female clients had canceled their sessions, apparently after receiving anonymous messages suggesting their trainer might have boundary issues. His apartment complex had started an investigation into complaints about excessive noise and unauthorized visitors. Meanwhile, Vanessa was dealing with her own problems. Her boss had started asking pointed questions about her schedule and her client management practices. The Morrison account was indeed in jeopardy, though not for the reasons she thought, and her carefully crafted image as a professional married woman was starting to develop cracks. The breaking point came on Wednesday evening. I was working in my study when I heard Vanessa on the phone in the kitchen, her voice rising with frustration. "This is ridiculous, Trent. You're being paranoid." I couldn't hear his side of the conversation, but I could imagine it. He was probably demanding to know if I suspected anything, if I was behind the sudden run of bad luck that had befallen him. "Alex doesn't know anything," Vanessa continued. "He's completely oblivious. Trust me, if he suspected something, he'd confront us directly. He's not smart enough for anything subtle." That stung more than I cared to admit, but it also confirmed what I'd suspected. They both saw me as a non-threat, someone too passive or too stupid to fight back effectively. Look, we just need to be more careful for a while. Let things cool down. There was a long pause, then Vanessa's voice dropped to a whisper. I love you too. We'll figure this out. After she hung up, I sat in the darkness of my study, processing what I'd heard. They were in love. This wasn't just a physical affair or a midlife crisis. It was a full-blown emotional betrayal. Vanessa was planning to leave me for Trent Parker, and she was just waiting for the right moment to drop the bomb. The next morning, I made a decision. It was time to escalate. I started with Trent's gym. Elite Fitness prided itself on its professional reputation and family-friendly atmosphere. They wouldn't appreciate learning that one of their trainers had a history of inappropriate relationships with married clients. I created a detailed dossier documenting Trent's pattern of behavior, not just with Vanessa, but with at least 3 other married women over the past 2 years. I included photos, text messages, and testimonials from the wronged husbands. Then I mailed copies to the gym's management, their corporate headquarters, and the local Better Business Bureau. Next, I turned my attention to Vanessa's professional life. Her PR firm handled several high-profile clients who valued discretion and moral character. They wouldn't be thrilled to learn that one of their account managers was having a very public affair that was becoming the talk of the town. I didn't have to fabricate anything. I simply compiled evidence of Vanessa's actual behavior and presented it in a professional format. Photos of her meeting Trent during work hours, screenshots of her social media posts showing her at expensive restaurants and hotels when she was supposed to be working, a timeline showing how her affair coincided with several client complaints about lack of attention to their accounts. I sent the package to her boss with a note expressing concern about the firm's reputation. Then I sat back and waited. The results were swift and devastating. By Friday afternoon, Trent had been suspended from Elite Fitness, pending a full investigation. 3 more of his clients had come forward with complaints about inappropriate behavior, and the gym was facing potential lawsuits. Vanessa's situation was even worse. Her boss had called her into his office for a meeting that lasted 2 hours and ended with her storming out of the building. She came home that evening looking like she'd been hit by a truck. They put me on administrative leave, she said, slumping onto the couch. Some anonymous troublemaker has been spreading lies about me. That's awful, I said, my voice carefully neutral. What kind of lies? They're saying I've been neglecting my clients, that I've been using company time for personal business. It's all completely fabricated. I'm sure the truth will come out, I said. These things usually do. She looked at me sharply, as if trying to detect sarcasm in my voice, but my expression remained perfectly sympathetic. I might need to find a new job, she said. This could ruin my career. We'll figure it out, I said. We're a team, remember? The word team made her flinch slightly. We both knew there was no team anymore, hadn't been for months. But she nodded anyway, probably calculating how much she needed my financial support while she looked for work. That night, she stayed up late on her phone, presumably coordinating with Trent about their next moves. I could hear her whispering in the bedroom, her voice urgent and worried. Good. Let them panic. Let them wonder who was targeting them and why. Let them suspect everyone and trust no one. I was just getting started. Over the weekend, I implemented the next phase of my plan. I'd learned that Trent had been borrowing money from several sources to maintain his lifestyle, including some unsavory characters who didn't appreciate late payments. A few anonymous tips to the right people ensured that his creditors would start applying serious pressure. I also reached out to the wives of Trent's other victims, providing them with evidence of their husbands' affairs. Within hours, 3 more marriages were in crisis, and Trent found himself dealing with angry confrontations from multiple directions. But my masterpiece was the social media campaign. Using fake accounts and careful timing, I orchestrated a viral moment that destroyed both of their reputations simultaneously. It started with a simple post in the local community Facebook group. Has anyone else noticed that certain professional relationships in our town seem to be crossing some lines? Asking for a friend. The post got dozens of responses within hours, with people sharing their own observations and suspicions. Someone posted a photo of Vanessa and Trent having coffee together. Another person shared screenshots of Trent's inappropriate messages to married women. A third person questioned whether Vanessa's PR firm knew about her extracurricular activities. By Sunday evening, the story had spread beyond Facebook to other social media platforms. Local news outlets started sniffing around, sensing a juicy scandal involving a respected PR professional and a predatory personal trainer. Vanessa spent the weekend in damage control mode, but it was too late. The narrative had taken on a life of its own, and public opinion had turned decisively against both of them. "This is a nightmare," she said Sunday night, staring at her phone with horror. "People are saying terrible things about me." "Social media can be cruel," I agreed. "Maybe you should take a break from it for a while." "I can't. I need to defend myself. These accusations are destroying my reputation." "What accusations?" I asked innocently. "I thought you said it was all lies." She looked at me with something approaching suspicion. "It is all lies. But that doesn't seem to matter anymore." As I watched her struggle with the consequences of her choices, I felt a deep satisfaction. This was justice, not the clean, simple justice of confrontation and divorce, but the messy, complicated justice of natural consequences. Vanessa and Trent had thought they were so clever, so careful, so superior to the boring husband they were betraying. They'd forgotten that in a small town, secrets have a way of coming to light, and reputations, once damaged, are nearly impossible to repair. But I wasn't finished with them yet. What they'd experienced so far was just the opening act. The real show was about to begin. Monday morning brought a knock at my door that I'd been expecting. Tom and Marge Patterson stood on my front porch, both looking uncomfortable and determined. Behind them, I could see Janelle Morrison sitting in her car, clearly the one who'd orchestrated this intervention. "Alex," Tom said, his voice artificially casual, "we need to talk." I invited them in, playing the role of the confused husband perfectly. "Of course. Coffee?" "This isn't a social call," Marge said, her usual friendliness replaced by cold disapproval. "We know what you've been doing." I raised my eyebrows in what I hoped looked like genuine confusion. "What I've been doing?" "Don't play dumb," Tom said, his face flushing red. "The anonymous tips, the social media posts, the coordinated attack on Vanessa and Trent, we know it's you." I sat down in my favorite armchair, the picture of calm reasonableness. "That's quite an accusation. What makes you think I'm involved?" Marge leaned forward, her eyes blazing with righteous indignation. "Because you're the only one with motive. Vanessa told us about your problems, about how you've been emotionally distant and neglectful. She's been trying to save your marriage, and this is how you repay her?" The revisionist history was breathtaking. According to this version of events, I was the villain who'd driven my wife into another man's arms through my own shortcomings. Vanessa was the victim, trying desperately to make things work while I sabotaged her efforts. "I see," I said. "And what exactly has Vanessa told you about our problems?" "She said you've been cold and distant for months," Tom said. "That you stopped trying to connect with her, stopped making an effort in your marriage. She's been lonely and vulnerable, and Trent was just being a friend." "A friend?" I repeated. "Is that what we're calling it?" "They haven't done anything wrong," Marge insisted. "Yes, they've grown close, but that's because Vanessa needed someone who actually cared about her feelings." I pulled out my phone and scrolled through the screenshots I'd taken of Vanessa and Trent's text messages. "Would you like to see what kind of caring we're talking about?" Both of them recoiled, as if I'd pulled out a weapon. "We're not interested in your manufactured evidence," Tom said. "Anyone can fake text messages these days." "You're right," I said, putting the phone away. "Anyone can fake anything. But the truth has a way of coming out, doesn't it?" Marge stood up, her hands shaking with anger. "You're a bitter, vindictive man, Alex Marchand. Vanessa deserves better than you." "I couldn't agree more," I said. "She should be free to pursue whatever makes her happy." The response clearly wasn't what they'd expected. They'd come here to confront the jealous husband, to shame me into backing down. Instead, they'd found someone who seemed perfectly willing to let his wife go. "So you'll stop this harassment campaign?" Tom asked. "What harassment campaign? I've been working and sleeping in my study. I haven't bothered anyone." "The anonymous tips, the social media posts. Are you accusing me of something specific? Because if you are, maybe we should involve the police. I'm sure they'd be very interested in investigating who's been spreading what they call lies about Vanessa and Trent." The mention of police made both of them uncomfortable. They knew as well as I did that everything that had been revealed was true, and that a police investigation would only make things worse for their friends. "Just leave them alone," Marge said finally. "Haven't you done enough damage?" After they left, I sat in my living room thinking about the conversation. It was fascinating how quickly people could rationalize betrayal when it suited their narrative. In their minds, Vanessa was the wronged party, driven to seek comfort elsewhere by her neglectful husband. The fact that she'd been lying and cheating for months was irrelevant. What mattered was that I wasn't playing the role of the devastated victim they expected. That evening, Vanessa came home with news that her administrative leave had been extended indefinitely. Her firm was conducting a full review of her client relationships and professional conduct. Several clients had specifically requested that she be removed from their accounts. "This is all your fault," she said, finally dropping the pretense that we were on the same side. "Tom and Marge told me about their visit. They said you practically admitted to orchestrating this whole thing." "Did I?" I asked. "What exactly did I admit to?" "Don't play games with me, Alex. I know you're behind this. The question is why. What do you want?" It was the first honest conversation we'd had in months. No more lies about late nights at work or girls' nights with Janelle. No more pretending that our marriage was salvageable. "What do I want?" I repeated. "I want you to be happy, Vanessa. Isn't that what you want too?" "Stop being sarcastic. This isn't a joke." "I'm not joking. You said I wasn't your priority anymore, that you needed excitement in your life. I'm just trying to help you get what you want." She stared at me for a long moment, trying to read my expression. "You're enjoying this, aren't you? Watching everything fall apart." "I'm enjoying watching the truth come out," I said. "For months, you've been living a double life, lying to me every single day. Did you think there wouldn't be consequences? So, this is revenge. You're destroying my career and my reputation because your feelings were hurt? Your career is being destroyed by your own choices. Your reputation is suffering because people are learning who you really are. I'm just a bystander." "Bullshit. You've been manipulating everything from behind the scenes. The timing is too perfect to be coincidental." She was right, of course, but I wasn't about to admit it. "Prove it." "I don't have to prove it. I know it, and you know it, and that's enough." "Is it?" Because knowing something and being able to do something about it are two very different things. The next morning, Vanessa was gone when I woke up. She'd left a note saying she was staying with Janelle until she could figure out her next steps. The note was cold and businesslike, with no mention of love or reconciliation or even basic courtesy. Perfect. Having her out of the house would make the final phase of my plan much easier to execute. I spent the day researching Trent's current situation. His suspension from Elite Fitness had become a termination after the investigation revealed a pattern of inappropriate behavior with female clients. His landlord had started eviction proceedings based on complaints from other tenants. His creditors were closing in, and he'd been forced to sell most of his possessions to make minimum payments. But the real coup was discovering that he'd been lying about his credentials. His certifications as a personal trainer had expired 2 years ago, and he'd never completed the continuing education required to renew them. Elite Fitness was now facing potential lawsuits from clients who'd been working with an unlicensed trainer. I compiled all of this information into a comprehensive report and sent copies to the State Licensing Board, the Better Business Bureau, and several law firms that specialized in fitness industry litigation. Then I sat back and waited for the final act to begin. It didn't take long. By Wednesday, local news outlets were running stories about the fitness fraud scandal at Elite Fitness. Trent's photo was plastered across social media as an example of why people needed to verify their trainer's credentials. Several of his former clients were threatening lawsuits, claiming they'd been injured while working with an unqualified instructor. Vanessa's situation was equally dire. Her firm had completed their investigation and terminated her employment for cause, citing unprofessional conduct and misuse of company resources. The termination meant she wouldn't be eligible for unemployment benefits and would have difficulty finding work in the PR industry. On Thursday evening, my phone rang. It was Vanessa, and she was crying. "Alex, please, we need to talk." "I'm listening." "Not over the phone. Can you meet me somewhere?" "Where?" "Rita's Coffee Corner, in an hour." I arrived at the coffee shop to find Vanessa sitting in the corner booth, looking smaller and more fragile than I'd ever seen her. Her perfect hair was unwashed, her makeup was smudged, and she was wearing the same clothes she'd had on 2 days ago. "Thank you for coming," she said, as I sat down across from her. "What did you want to talk about?" "I want this to stop. Whatever you're doing, whatever you're planning, I want it to stop." "I'm not doing anything, Vanessa. I'm just living my life. Please don't lie to me anymore. We both know you're behind everything that's happened. The question is what it will take to make you stop." I studied her face, seeing desperation where there used to be confidence, fear where there used to be arrogance. "What are you offering?" I asked. "I'll come home. I'll end things with Trent. We can try counseling, try to work things out." "Why would I want that?" The question seemed to stun her. "Because we're married. Because we used to love each other." "Used to," I repeated. Past tense. "It doesn't have to be past tense. We could start over. With you settling for the boring husband because your exciting lover turned out to be a fraud and a loser?" She flinched as if I'd slapped her. It's not like that." "Isn't it? 3 days ago you were telling him you loved him. Now you want to come crawling back because your other option fell through." "I made a mistake," she whispered. "I got caught up in the excitement, the attention. But I realize now that what we had was real." "What we had was real," I agreed. Past tense. What you destroyed was real too. We sat in silence for several minutes, the weight of 7 years of marriage pressing down on the small table between us. "So what happens now?" she asked finally. "Now you live with the consequences of your choices, just like everyone else. And us? There is no us anymore. You made that clear months ago." I stood up to leave, but her voice stopped me. "I'm sorry, Alex. For all of it. I know that doesn't change anything, but I needed you to know." I looked down at her, this woman who'd shared my bed and my dreams and my hopes for the future. She looked genuinely remorseful, genuinely broken by what she'd lost. "I know you are," I said, "but sorry doesn't fix broken things. Sometimes they just stay broken." As I walked out of the coffee shop, I felt something I hadn't expected. Sadness. Not for what I'd done, but for what we'd both lost along the way. The marriage was over, had been over for months before either of us admitted it. But seeing Vanessa reduced to begging for a second chance she didn't deserve was harder than I'd anticipated. Still, I'd come too far to stop now. The final act was about to begin, and it would be the most satisfying of all. Friday morning brought the news I'd been waiting for. Trent Parker had been arrested for fraud and practicing without a license. The charges carried potential jail time and hefty fines, and his bail had been set high enough that he'd be spending the weekend in county lockup. I celebrated with an extra cup of coffee at Rita's, where the local gossip network was in full swing. "Can you believe it?" Rita said, refilling my mug. "That trainer was completely fake. Makes you wonder what else he was lying about." "It makes you wonder," I agreed. The bell above the door chimed, and Janelle Morrison walked in. She looked like she hadn't slept in days, her usually perfect appearance disheveled and worn. She spotted me immediately and marched over to my table. "You," she said, pointing an accusing finger at me. "This is all your fault." "Good morning, Janelle. How are you holding up?" "Don't you dare act innocent. Vanessa told me everything. You've been systematically destroying her life because you can't handle the fact that she found someone better." Rita moved closer, not even pretending she wasn't listening. Half the coffee shop had gone quiet, sensing drama. "Someone better?" I asked. "You mean the unlicensed trainer who's sitting in jail for fraud? Trent made mistakes, but he's not a bad person. He genuinely cared about Vanessa." "I'm sure he did, right up until his world came crashing down and he started looking for someone else to blame." Janelle's face flushed red. "You think you're so smart, don't you? Pulling strings from behind the scenes like some kind of puppet master. But you're just a bitter, pathetic man who can't let go." "If you say so." "Vanessa is devastated. She's lost her job, her reputation, her future. Are you happy now?" I considered the question seriously. "You know what, Janelle? I think I am." The honesty of the answer seemed to shock her. She'd expected denial or justification, not a straightforward admission of satisfaction. "You're a monster," she whispered. "Maybe. But I'm a monster who was faithful to his wife for 7 years while she was planning to leave me for a fraud. Perspective is everything." Janelle stormed out, but not before announcing to the entire coffee shop that I was a vindictive psychopath who'd destroyed 2 innocent people's lives. The declaration had the opposite effect from what she'd intended. Instead of turning people against me, it sparked a debate about whether Vanessa and Trent had gotten what they deserved. That afternoon, I received a call from my brother Jerry. "I've been following the local news," he said. "Quite a story about that trainer and the PR woman." "Small towns," I said. "Everyone's business becomes everyone else's entertainment." "Indeed. You wouldn't happen to know anything about how all this information came to light, would you?" "I might have heard a few rumors here and there." Jerry chuckled. "I'm proud of you, little brother. You handled this like a professional." "I don't know what you mean." "Sure you don't. But for what it's worth, you did the right thing. People like that need to face consequences for their actions." That evening, I was working in my study when I heard a car pull into the driveway. Through the window, I could see Vanessa getting out of Janelle's car. She looked determined, but nervous, like someone preparing for a difficult conversation. She used her key to let herself in, calling out my name as she entered. "I'm in the study," I replied. She appeared in the doorway, having clearly made an effort to clean herself up. Her hair was washed and styled, her makeup was carefully applied, and she was wearing one of my favorite dresses, a blue sundress she'd worn on our 2nd anniversary. "We need to talk," she said. "I thought we covered everything yesterday." "Not everything. I have a proposition for you." I saved my work and turned to face her. "I'm listening." "I'll give you an uncontested divorce. You can keep the house, the cars, everything. I won't ask for alimony or any kind of settlement. In exchange, you stop whatever you're doing to destroy what's left of my life." It was a reasonable offer, probably more generous than what I'd get in court. But it missed the fundamental point of what I'd been doing. "What makes you think I want a divorce?" I asked. "Don't you?" What I wanted was a wife who was honest with me. What I wanted was a marriage built on mutual respect and fidelity. What I wanted was to matter to the person who mattered most to me. And now? Now I want to see how this story ends. She sat down in the chair across from my desk, the same chair where she used to sit when we'd plan vacations or discuss our dreams for the future. "Trent's in jail," she said quietly. "His life is ruined. Isn't that enough? Trent's situation is unfortunate, but it's not my primary concern. Then what is? Justice, consequences, the idea that actions have meaning. I've lost everything, Alex. My job, my reputation, my future. What more do you want?" I leaned back in my chair, considering the question. What did I want? Revenge? I'd certainly gotten that. Satisfaction? That too. But there was something else, something deeper that I was still working toward. "I want you to understand," I said finally. "I want you to really comprehend what you did and why it mattered. I understand that I hurt you. I understand that I made terrible choices. Do you? Because yesterday you were still trying to blame me for driving you into Trent's arms. You were still acting like the victim in this situation. I was scared and desperate. I said things I didn't mean. Or you said things you did mean, and now you're trying to take them back because the consequences are more severe than you expected." We stared at each other across the desk, 7 years of shared history hanging between us like a bridge that had been burned from both ends. "What would it take?" she asked. "What would I have to do to make this right?" "Nothing," I said. "There's nothing you can do to make this right. The marriage is over, the trust is broken, and the damage is done. All that's left is to see how the story ends." "And how does it end?" I smiled, and something in my expression made her shrink back in her chair. "Tomorrow night, the Riverside Community Center is hosting their annual charity auction. It's the biggest social event of the year. Everyone who's anyone will be there, including several reporters who've been following the story about the fitness fraud scandal." "Alex, no, please don't." "I'm not going to do anything, Vanessa. I'm just going to be there, enjoying the evening like any other member of the community. What happens after that? Well, that's up to you and Trent. Trent's in jail. His bail hearing is tomorrow morning. I suspect someone will post bond for him, someone who still believes in his innocence, who thinks he's been wrongly accused." Understanding dawned in her eyes. "You want me to bail him out?" "I don't want you to do anything, but I suspect you will because that's who you are. You'll convince yourself that standing by him is the noble thing to do, that love conquers all, that together you can weather this storm. And then? And then you'll both show up at the charity auction because you'll want to prove that you're not ashamed, that you have nothing to hide. You'll want to show the community that you're strong and united and unbreakable. That would be social suicide. Yes, it would. But you'll do it anyway, because the alternative is admitting that everything you've done was for nothing, that you destroyed your marriage for a man who isn't worth it. She was quiet for a long time, processing the trap I'd laid for her. Finally, she spoke. "You've thought of everything, haven't you? I've tried to be thorough. And if I don't bail him out, if I don't go to the auction, then you'll spend the rest of your life wondering what might have been. You'll always question whether you abandoned someone you claimed to love when he needed you most. That's diabolical. That's human nature. You've invested too much in this relationship to walk away now, even though any rational person would cut their losses and run." She stood up, her hands shaking slightly. "I hate you for this. I know. But you'll do it anyway." After she left, I sat in my study feeling a deep sense of completion. The trap was set, the bait was in place, and the prey would walk willingly into the snare. Because I understood something about Vanessa that she didn't understand about herself. She was too proud to admit she'd been wrong, too stubborn to cut her losses, and too invested in her narrative to see the disaster she was walking toward. Tomorrow night would bring the final act of our marriage's destruction. And for the first time in months, I was genuinely looking forward to a social event. Saturday evening arrived with perfect weather. Clear skies, mild temperature, and just enough of a breeze to keep people comfortable as they gathered outside the Riverside Community Center. I arrived early, wearing my best suit and a smile that felt genuine for the first time in months. The charity auction was indeed the social event of the year. The parking lot was full of expensive cars, and the community center was decorated with elegant banners and twinkling lights. Local business leaders mingled with politicians, socialites, and journalists, all gathered to support various charitable causes while engaging in the kind of networking that kept small-town society functioning. I found Rita near the registration table, looking elegant in a navy dress that complemented her silver hair. "Alex," she said, genuinely pleased to see me. "You look wonderful. It's good to see you getting out." "Thank you. You look beautiful yourself." "Such a charmer. Are you here alone?" "For now," I said, scanning the crowd. "But I suspect the evening will get more interesting as it progresses." At exactly 7:30, just as the auction was about to begin, Vanessa and Trent made their entrance. They walked through the main doors hand in hand, both dressed impeccably and wearing expressions of defiant confidence. Vanessa had chosen a red dress that hugged her figure perfectly, while Trent wore an expensive suit that probably represented his last remaining asset. The reaction was immediate and electric. Conversations stopped mid-sentence as heads turned to stare at the infamous couple. Camera phones appeared as people documented the moment when the town's most notorious affair became a public spectacle. I had to admire their courage, even as I recognized their stupidity. They were walking into a room full of people who knew exactly who they were and what they'd done, but they held their heads high and projected an image of unshakable unity. "Well, I'll be damned," Rita whispered beside me. "They actually showed up." "Love makes people do foolish things," I observed. Vanessa's eyes found mine across the crowded room. For a moment, we stared at each other with perfect understanding. She knew this was the moment I'd orchestrated, the final test of her commitment to the choice she'd made. I knew she was here because she couldn't resist the challenge, couldn't admit that her grand romance was built on lies and delusion. Trent, meanwhile, was scanning the room like a man expecting trouble. His confidence was more fragile than Vanessa's, his smile more forced. He'd spent 2 days in jail, and the experience had clearly shaken him. The auction began with a series of small items, gift certificates, artwork, and donated services from local businesses. Vanessa and Trent found seats near the back of the room, trying to maintain a low profile while still making their statement. But their presence was impossible to ignore, and I could see people throughout the audience stealing glances and whispering among themselves. The real drama began when lot number 15 came up for bidding. A weekend getaway package to a luxury resort in Vermont. It was exactly the kind of romantic escape that would appeal to a couple trying to rebuild their relationship away from prying eyes. Trent raised his hand to bid, starting at the minimum of $200. A few other people joined the bidding, driving the price up steadily. When it reached $800, most of the other bidders dropped out, leaving only Trent and an elderly businessman I didn't recognize. "900, the businessman called out. Trent hesitated, clearly calculating whether he could afford to go higher. I could see Vanessa whispering urgently in his ear, probably encouraging him to bid whatever it took to win the package. 1,000, Trent said, his voice carrying across the now silent room. 1,100, the businessman countered immediately. Trent's face was flushed with embarrassment and determination. He was trapped in exactly the kind of situation I'd hoped for, forced to choose between financial responsibility and public humiliation. 1,200, he said, his voice cracking slightly. The businessman smiled and shook his head, declining to bid further. The auctioneer called for any other bids, then brought down his gavel. Sold to bidder number 47 for $1,200. The room erupted in polite applause, but I could hear the undertone of amusement and disbelief. Everyone knew that Trent Parker was unemployed and facing criminal charges, Yet he'd just spent $1,200 on a luxury vacation. It was exactly the kind of poor judgment that had gotten him into trouble in the first place. As Trent made his way to the payment table, I noticed several reporters taking notes and snapping photos. The story was writing itself. Disgraced trainer spends lavishly at charity auction while facing fraud charges. But the real masterpiece came with lot number 23, a diamond tennis bracelet donated by the town's most exclusive jewelry store. The bidding started at $500 and quickly escalated as several women in the audience competed for the elegant piece. When the bidding reached $1,500, Trent surprised everyone by raising his hand. $1,600, he called out. Every head in the room turned to stare at him. The bracelet was clearly intended as a gift for Vanessa, a public declaration of his commitment despite their recent troubles. But it was also a catastrophically expensive gesture from a man who couldn't afford his rent. $1,700, countered Margaret Ashworth, the wife of a prominent local attorney. $1,800, Trent responded immediately. The bidding continued, with Trent matching every increase despite the obvious strain it was putting on his finances. Vanessa looked mortified, probably realizing that her lover was digging himself into an even deeper hole for the sake of making a grand gesture. When the bidding reached $2,500, Mrs. Ashworth shook her head and withdrew. The auctioneer looked around the room for any other bidders, then brought down his gavel. Sold to bidder number 47 for $2,500. This time, the applause was muted and uncomfortable. Trent had just spent nearly $4,000 on 2 auction items, money he clearly didn't have. The gesture was either incredibly romantic or incredibly stupid, depending on your perspective. As he walked to the payment table again, I could see his hands shaking. The reality of what he'd just done was starting to sink in. He'd let his pride and his desire to impress Vanessa override his common sense, and now he was facing the consequences. The evening continued with more auction items, but the focus of the room remained on Vanessa and Trent. People were openly staring now, no longer pretending to be discreet. The couple had become the evening's entertainment, a live-action drama playing out in front of an audience that couldn't look away. During the intermission, I approached their table. They were sitting close together, Vanessa's hand resting on Trent's arm in a gesture of support that looked more desperate than loving. "Congratulations on your successful bids," I said pleasantly. "That's quite a romantic gesture." Trent looked up at me with undisguised hatred. "What do you want?" "Nothing at all. I just wanted to say that I admire your commitment. It takes real dedication to spend $4,000 you don't have on the woman you love." "How do you know what I can and can't afford?" he demanded. "Public records," I said with a shrug. "Your financial situation has been pretty well documented in the local press, but I'm sure you'll find a way to make the payments work." Vanessa finally spoke up. "Just leave us alone, Alex. Haven't you done enough?" "I haven't done anything," I said. "You're the ones who chose to come here tonight. You're the ones who chose to make a public spectacle of yourselves. I'm just an observer." "You orchestrated this whole thing," she hissed. "You knew we'd come. You knew what would happen." "I knew you'd do exactly what you've always done. Let your pride override your judgment. But that's not my fault. That's just who you are." The second half of the auction proceeded without any more dramatic bidding from Trent, probably because he'd already maxed out whatever credit he had left. But the damage was done. The story of the evening would be about the disgraced trainer who'd spent a fortune he didn't have on jewelry for his married lover. As the event wound down, I watched Vanessa and Trent make their way to the exit. They were still holding hands, still projecting an image of unity, but I could see the cracks in their facade. The weight of their situation was finally starting to crush them. Near the door, they were intercepted by a reporter from the local newspaper. I couldn't hear the conversation, but I could see Trent's face growing redder as the questions continued. Finally, he pushed past the reporter and stormed out, dragging Vanessa behind him. I followed them outside, staying far enough back to avoid being seen. In the parking lot, they were having an animated argument next to Janelle's car. Their voices carried in the still night air. $4,000, Trent? Are you insane? I was trying to show them that we're not ashamed, that we're not going to hide. We can't afford $4,000. You don't even have a job. I'll figure it out. I always do. How? How are you going to figure it out? You're facing criminal charges, you can't work as a trainer, and now you've just committed to spending money we don't have. So what are you saying? That you're giving up on us? There was a long pause before Vanessa answered. I'm saying that maybe we need to be realistic about our situation. Realistic? You mean you want to crawl back to your boring husband because things got difficult? Don't you dare try to make this my fault. You're the one who lied about your credentials. You're the one who got us into this mess. And you're the one who said you loved me. Was that a lie too? I couldn't see Vanessa's face, but I could hear the exhaustion in her voice when she finally responded. I don't know anymore. I don't know anything anymore. They got in the car and drove away, leaving me standing in the parking lot with a sense of profound satisfaction. The evening had gone exactly as I'd predicted. Trent's pride had led him to make a catastrophically expensive gesture that had only highlighted his desperate circumstances. Vanessa had been forced to confront the reality of what her new life actually looked like, and their relationship, already strained by external pressure, was now cracking under the weight of their own poor decisions. As I drove home, I reflected on the past few months and what I'd accomplished. I'd systematically dismantled the lives of two people who'd betrayed me, using nothing more than the truth and their own character flaws against them. They'd destroyed themselves. I'd just provided the stage and the audience. But more than that, I'd proven something important to myself. I wasn't the passive, boring husband they'd taken me for. I was capable of strategic thinking, of patience, of executing a complex plan over months without being detected. I was, in my own quiet way, formidable. The next morning brought news that completed my victory. Trent Parker had been arrested again, this time for writing bad checks to cover his auction purchases. The jewelry store and the resort had both pressed charges when his payments bounced, and he was now facing additional fraud charges on top of his existing legal problems. Vanessa, meanwhile, had been evicted from Janelle's apartment after a screaming match that had the neighbors calling the police. She was now staying at a cheap motel on the outskirts of town, her money running low and her options dwindling. I sat in my kitchen, drinking coffee and reading the news reports with deep satisfaction. The story was over. The marriage was over. The betrayal had been answered with consequences that were both swift and devastating. My phone rang. It was Vanessa. "Alex," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I need help." "I'm listening." "I have nowhere to go. No money, no job, no friends. I know I don't deserve it, but could I come home? Just temporarily, until I can figure out what to do next?" I considered the request. It would be easy to say yes, to let her crawl back and rebuild some version of our life together. It would be the merciful thing to do, the forgiving thing. But mercy and forgiveness were luxuries I could no longer afford. "No," I said simply. "Please, Alex. I'm begging you." "You made your choice, Vanessa. You chose excitement over stability, passion over commitment, Trent over me. Those choices have consequences. I was wrong, I see that now. I threw away something real for something that was just an illusion. Yes, you did. And now you get to live with that knowledge for the rest of your life. So that's it? 7 years of marriage mean nothing to you? They meant everything to me. That's why what you did was so unforgivable." I hung up the phone and sat in the silence of my house now, not ours. Outside, the world continued as it always had. But inside, everything had changed. I'd won. Completely, decisively, devastatingly. Vanessa and Trent had lost everything: their reputations, their careers, their future together, and any chance of rebuilding what they'd destroyed. But as I sat there in my victory, I realized something unexpected. I felt empty. The satisfaction I'd anticipated was real, but fleeting. The revenge I'd plotted so carefully had been executed perfectly, but it hadn't filled the hole that Vanessa's betrayal had left in my life. I was alone now, truly alone, in a way I'd never been before. The marriage was over, the friendships were destroyed, and the future I'd planned was gone. I'd gotten exactly what I'd worked for, but the cost had been higher than I'd expected. Still, I couldn't bring myself to regret it. Justice had been served. Consequences had been delivered. The natural order had been restored. And sometimes, that had to be enough.